Hello there. Thanks for popping by again on another clip on the Teaching Teenagers English channel. A couple of weeks ago, I did a recording which dealt with the question of what we can do with our quiet students. And I think that was clip number 17 or 18. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend you maybe go back and watch that before this one and then come back to this. That's obviously entirely up to you. But in it, I suggested that we just leave our quiet students alone, which is fine. It's a certain point of view. It's a certain perspective that I wanted to get across. But I am aware, and was painfully aware when I was recording it, that it might not help you very much if you're trying to get your students to speak. I suggested as much on the clip itself, but there are things we can do. So I wanted to address them now and give you a couple of pointers as to what we can do if we're with reticent speakers, if we're struggling getting our students to speak. One of the basic solutions that I use myself is to drop down to a more basic unit of exchange. And what I mean by that is I do quite a few troubleshooting sessions with teachers of teenagers, and they often say, I can't get my teenagers to speak. And then when I do a little bit of diagnostic questioning, it turns out that they're trying, I say, you can't get them to say anything. Can you get them to repeat a sentence? Yes. Can you get them to read out sentences? Yes. Okay, so they will speak. Yes, but they won't have a free conversation. Okay. So when we say we can't get our students to speak, it's worth looking exactly at what we mean by that to start with. And if it is that we're having problems getting them to engage in free conversation, either with a partner or in open class with the teacher, then we need to take into account as well that there are other factors. If you're having a free conversation, the units of exchange with a partner, for example, are quite complicated. You're having to formulate your own original ideas, and you're having to make sure the language is correct because you're doing it in a second or third or fourth language. So this is all quite complicated. So it doesn't mean necessarily that they don't want to speak. It's just that A, it involves a risk, B, it involves a lot of brain work. So what I mean by dropping down to a more basic unit of exchange is we get them to speak to each other, but we take out some of the cognitive strain, some of the effort. Basically, we can give them sentences to read to each other. Okay, reading sentences to each other might not be the free conversation that we'd hoped for. It might not be quite as creative, engaging. They might not be putting the whole of their soul into it, but then they are talking to each other. And there is also a middle point, and it's one that I go for most of the time. If we've just said to the class, talk to each other about your last holiday, then that might fall flat. If we give them a list of 20 questions about their last holiday and say, ask and answer, and your answer always has to be twice as long as the question, then we're going to have more success. So in a nutshell, one of my solutions is long lists of questions. And to guarantee that they practice a certain amount of language, or the target language that we have in mind, we can embed the target language into the questions rather than hope that it magically appears in the answers. So for example, let's say you're working from a structural syllabus and your aim is to allow your students to practice the present perfect tense. Now, you could give your students a few questions. What have you done this week? What have you done this morning? Etc. And hope that they will produce various examples and permutations of the present perfect in the answers. Oh, I've had 3 lessons. Oh, I've been to such and such a place. Or You can make sure that structures are embedded in the questions. What have you eaten this morning? How many people have you spoken to via WhatsApp or text message? What have you learned in your lesson so far? What subjects have you had? So we've got lots of different examples of the present perfect in the questions. So when they're asking and answering, by the very virtue of the fact that they've asked these questions, we know that they've practiced or they've had the present perfect coming out of their mouth. Similarly, if you've got a lexical set, I think I remember one that was phrasal verbs for family relationships, look up to, get on with, take after. You could ask them, talk about your family, or you could adapt what you have in the book maybe and create a list of questions. Who do you get on with best in your immediate family? Who do you get on with best in your extended family? Who do you get on with best in your class? Again, it's not family, but we're practicing that. Do you take after anybody in terms of looks? Do you take after anybody in your family in terms of appearance? If they have a long list of these, even if some of the questions fail or don't really go anywhere, by virtue of the fact that they've got the language in the questions and they're fielding it, we know they're getting a minimal amount of practice. And in order to mix that up and double the exposure, we can also have them swap partners and repeat. So if you're not getting that joyous, creative, free conversation that you were hoping for, then go for single, simple questions, but a long list of them with your target language, items, structures already embedded in them to guarantee that there is a minimal amount of practice. Hope that helps strengthen energy with your teaching.